Hello and welcome to Hexa Talk, the industry refresher powered by Hexanica. Today's topic is data-driven audit, and especially we are going to focus on auditing of PDFs or unstructured data. It seems that the term data-driven is getting tossed around quite a bit these days. You are probably even seeing and hearing the term data-driven audits. So what does data-driven audit mean? Today, we are going to hear from an expert in the audit space about what exactly the term data-driven audit means. Let me introduce Hania Arbus McCarthy. She is the managing director of Gladcliffe LLC. Prior to her work at Gladcliffe, she was chief audit executive and global head of internal audit at American and Canadian Stock and Transfer and Trust. She is a member of Audit and Accounting Committee of the Board of Trustees of New York Athletic Club and a member of the Alumni Committee of the Board of the French Lessee of New York. Welcome, Hania.
Thank you, Yogesh. Thank you very much for having me. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure working with you on these very, very important topics that, as you just mentioned, are very much front of mind on out there in the internal audit space, but also more generally. What does data-driven mean? I also like to use data-enabled, right? Because internal audit has been going on for a very, very long time, and is critical to good governance. So we're really just adding an engine to it with data. The key is really getting started and making sure you're able to very quickly demonstrate to your stakeholders the value so that you can get the buy-in, the investment and the budget to get started. That said, the budget can actually be extremely limited. So much can be done with basic tools, but clearly as you move in to looking at much more important and broader topics, concepts around optical character recognition become critical. What do we mean by data-driven or data-enabled? Everything we do in internal audit can and should involve the use of data, planning, field work, all the way through reporting and showing our stakeholders some really great visualizations to support our insights.
Sure. So in a nutshell, you can do more in a less is what I'm getting out of your first feedback or first comment, Hania. Given that, what are the challenges of data-driven audit? What are you facing from your clients? What are the restrictions? If you could put some light on that.
Thank you, Yogesh. I think the key term there is challenges. There's absolutely loads and loads of challenges, right? I think a lot of internal audit departments right now, particularly in the small and mid-sized space, are in a situation where they're getting questions, important questions, pertinent questions from their audit committees. And once the audit committee gets involved and starts looking for data-driven insights, namely moving from a sample base to a full population testing approach, also being able to quantify our findings rather than extrapolating from the very small sample and then coming up with a total potential error rate, right? It's a game changer. What are the challenges? I hear all the time, right, that the data that they can get out of the systems from their stakeholders, it's a mess, frankly, right? And that's really the first port of call. And what's interesting about data is that even if the data is a mess coming in, that's part of our data analytics practice, right? Which is first we scrub, first we understand. And we're going to get a whole bunch of important and interesting insights for our stakeholders that they find valuable, right? The stakeholders want to have really, really clean data. And I think they really appreciate the internal audit teams that are going out there and helping them scrub it. Day two, the challenge is, right, actually building out the script, right? Let's understand what it is that we're looking for, first of all, right? Asking the right question is critical. and then building out the scripts, and then how do we get to the insights, and then the nirvana, right? The next step in a continuous auditing process is really migrating those scripts to your business so that they can run their own scripts.
Correct.
Internal audit, so that internal audit resources can be maintained in terms of building out and always looking for the next step, so our internal audit teams are on the front foot.
Sure. So earlier you mentioned, Hania, that one of the biggest challenges is getting started, right? And then you have additional challenges when you get started, is how to equip your existing audit team who may not necessarily know how to code. They are not data engineers, they are not data scientists, and there are a lot of AI-driven technologies available today that essentially do not require internal audit teams to even know programming, but they can play with the data. They can build, as you mentioned, scripts just with drag and drop and in very simplistic way using kind of low code or no code softwares. Now, with that, my next question related to that is, can you highlight any use case, any examples in data-driven audit, whether you have experienced that, whether unstructured data, structured data, we called earlier PDF files, or etc. So if you could share that very briefly, that would be great.
Absolutely. And data is very much a passion of mine, and it's always such a pleasure to share it with the clients. I think two examples that come to mind. The first one is around third-party risk management or vendor management. So for those businesses out there, those organizations out there, in both in the regulated and the unregulated space, vendor management and managing of expenses, managing of fraud risk can be absolutely critical. This is an area that's incredibly apt to data analytics, and really starting to take a look at the whole population in terms of purchases that are done where we may have invoices that are issued before the requisition and purchase order process has gone through. So much opportunity for identifying gains and volumes, and grouping activities with vendors, and going back to the business with potential ideas for savings. Another area that's been incredibly helpful for the clients is starting to use optical character recognition on the PDFs. From an internal audit perspective, it's a game changer to be able to load up thousands of pages reflecting hundreds or more contracts, and really being able to pick up individual items in the contract, be that fee rates, be that whether or not they're signed, the date they're signed, any other manual boxes that may have been ticked, right? And getting all of that information out of thousands of pages into an Excel spreadsheet, and all of a sudden you're able to take a look at 100% of your population. And it's such an interesting process, right? Working with the OCR applications, as it really involves truly artificial intelligence versus the more robotic process automation, which I think we're seeing a tremendous amount of out there right now. Two examples in that space I'd like to cite is working with PDFs of reports that have a really unfortunate layout, right? So while it would be possible to remanipulate them in Excel, if you actually go from the PDF and pick up the individual fields, right, we're really able to get them very quickly. We're able to get them very quickly extracted and up, so that we are working no longer with effectively what's unstructured data to highly structured data, and then we can go about our audit work. Really great stuff happening in the space. Maybe a quick word on the on one of the challenges that we're seeing out there in terms of getting started and getting successful, and starting to put some points up on the scoreboard in the space, has been really selecting the right data partner, or the data analytics tool partner, and the data analytics consulting partner. I think going through the process of really understanding what your objectives are and then working with the right partner is just critical in terms of being successful. There's a range. There's a range of folks out there.
And maybe, Anya, thank you for that explanation. We can quickly share an example.
This is actually a live example of a series of items and data points that are laid out in a really unfortunate way, right? So by using optical character recognition on this particular document, is pretty voluminous. If I recall, this is hundreds of pages. We're able to actually pick out these individual items, create columns, label them, and dump them into an Excel spreadsheet, right? Which is clearly a game changer. Again, it could have been done with Excel, but at a huge expense of well, frankly, just time and energy of internal audit staff that could actually be deployed to be doing much more value-added risk-based work.
Correct.
So the result on this particular piece was fantastic. Also, once the script is built, then it's just a matter of running it, dashboarding it, and then using it as a communication tool with your auditee stakeholders, as well as your audit committee of the board of directors.
Right. And as you mentioned, the scripts, not only you can read the documents automatically without manual intervention and increase the scope of what you can do, the sampling size. In fact, you can do 100% on each invoice. And not only that, you can build the scripts in a very simplistic user interface driven as well. So you can run the scripts on every document. And that is essentially what you're talking about, data-driven audit, right? In this case, the data is invoices and maybe a feed from your payment system and other systems, and you're connecting all the dots. So from starting with getting the data in different formats to building the scripts that you have mentioned, all the way to a report that is showing if something has passed your particular test or not, and are there any deficiencies in the whole process. So end to end, you can do it without writing a single query. And I think that's what you were talking about earlier, correct?
Absolutely. And I think that the interface with your tool is absolutely critical. First of all, it gives you transparency as to exactly what the steps are, right? As auditors, we absolutely need the tasks to be repeatable and sustainable, but also auditable, right? We need to be able to see exactly what happened to which sheet, which item of data, and how and in what sequence, right? And data-enabled internal audit is really the missing link to something that was, frankly, just a dream even 10 years ago, which is really that move from point in time audit, which is old-fashioned way, to continuous auditing, and also just being able to work much more closely with our stakeholder auditees as we move into really sharing our scripts, sharing our dashboards, and really helping them monitor their progress against organizational objectives.
Correct. And one more example that Hania perhaps we had was, you can actually review the agreements, pages of agreements, not just one page invoice, but large set of agreements, and pick up information from there as well. So we want to perhaps let the audience know that it's not limited to very simple documents, but you can actually have contracts and train your OCR to read from the contracts as well, right?
Yeah, I think this one actually is the real game changer, right? I think some of the prior example we shared, look, I think it actually can be done manually. But again, I mean, it would take days and weeks and rework and hassle. Going into contracts, right? Be they client contracts, customer contracts, loan agreements, any kind of agreement, even if they're in slightly different templates, because as we all know, our templates evolve over time. Actually, it cannot be done in any way other than sample based.
Correct.
without using the OCR technology, right? And that's really the game changer, is that if you're looking at a population of 300, 400, 3,000, 4,000 contracts or discrete PDFs, PDF documents that are multiple pages long, it just cannot be done any other way than doing samples of 5, 10, 15, 25, and 40, right? The numbers we all know and use all of the time.
Correct.
Absolute game changer.
And that also means probability of less fraud, right? Recently, I came across an article, especially around Yale University, where the internal audit could have identified these issues with purchases of computer system and the payments being done, etc. This could have been found if a data-driven audit was enabled at such financial institutions. Any thoughts or any closing comments on this topic, Hani?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up that particular case. A $40 million fraud out of Yale Medical School made the news and really should have. I think we don't have a tremendous amount of detail around this particular instance of fraud yet. But from an internal audit perspective, and it's always tricky when the internal audit profession is faced with the dreaded question, right? Where was internal audit when all of this was happening? And I think it was the fraud rate. I think it was over a significant time frame. I think it was over 10 years. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see when the details come out. But clearly, when we're looking at 100% of the population, we have an entirely next gen tool at our disposal in terms of looking at 100% of the population. I think what that fraud was, I believe, was a finance director. A finance director who was purchasing computer equipment, receiving the computer equipment, loading it up in the trunk of her car, and then proceeding to sell the computer equipment. Detailed analyses around the vendors, the purchases, the transactions over time would and should and would have shown some analytics that would have indicated that would have indicated that the equipment may not have actually been used internally. Very interesting stuff.
So to summarize, if you want to do more in less, data-driven audit is one key, especially for chief audit executives or institutions. That is how I would like to summarize this conversation today, Hania. Thank you again for another great HexaTalk session. We will continue discussing about data-driven audit, give more examples, share more case studies, and perhaps talk about the challenges that you mentioned. What are the challenges, how the banks or financial institutions or other institutions are solving it today. So thank you for this opportunity, Hania. It was great talking to you on this topic, and I look forward to continuing this discussion.
Thank you very much, Yogesh. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.